Hey guys, welcome into this edition of the Heel Tough Blog podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you guys as always. And as you can see, we have a friend with us today, Taylor Tannebum from the ACC Network. She does a ton of stuff now, but she is mostly known for being a host for the ACC Network, of course, host ACC Huddle. She does a tremendous job, and she is nice enough to join us here. Taylor, it's been a little bit since we've talked to you. How you been doing? You made a big move since the last time you were on here.
No longer with you in Charlotte. Now I'm in Connecticut, but obviously I miss it there. But it's been good up here. I get to go to campus every day at ESPN, which is great. And still repping the ACC, though, of course.
That's right. That's right. You got to be repping the Knowles right now, I'm assuming, right?
Always, always. But, if it comes to winning, there have been some disappointments here lately. But as always, I'm an alum, so I will always support Florida State.
You got to love it. And as you know, I'm supporting Carolina, of course,
Always.
as always. But hey, here's the thing. We want to start out with the biggest news of the day, which was that ESPN decides to pick up the option for the ACC Network. It now runs through 2036, and they're talking about doing some different stuff in terms of revenue distribution. So ultimately, what is this that happened today? And do you think this is a good thing for the conference?
So essentially, ESPN has a deal with the ACC as a conference that was made until 2036. There was, though, in that contract an option to pick it up, to further it through from 2027 through 2036. They could have chosen, no, we're going to separate after 27 and the ACC can go find another television deal, or ESPN says, no, this is beneficial for both parties involved. And we're going to continue on with this relationship through the duration of the full contract. So today came out that they decided, hey, we're going to pick this option up. We're going to move forward. So the ACC will be on ESPN through 2036, which that relationship is obviously mutually beneficial. And it basically means the games that you see, the live events that you see will continue to go through ESPN. And beyond, right? Digitally, of course, as well. So that's great news in the sense that the ACC has a television home. And the parts you're talking about are now basically what this means is the ACC can table this because this was kind of looming. They can now continue their conversations with Clemson and Florida State and those lawsuits that are still ongoing, try to figure out how they can come to an agreement here and move forward. And then also there's some things involved where obviously now revenue is the big topic of conversation all around college athletics. And because this TV deal with ESPN and the ACC runs through 2036, there's no extra TV revenue that's going to come out of this contract, right? It's not being renegotiated before 2036 at this point. So the ACC is always trying to find now creative ways to try to close the gap between the SEC, the Big Ten, and the ACC monetarily, and try to give teams or programs, schools in the Atlantic Coast Conference incentives for winning. Maybe potentially one of the conversations is the more ratings you draw in, the more money you get in return. The higher your ratings are, the more money you get in return. That is something that's certainly on the table. They did start in 2025 success initiatives in the ACC, so it's not a complete split around the pie of revenue. It's football and basketball. If you finish in the top 25, if you make a bowl game, if you make the CFP, if you go to March Madness, you get more money for your program and your school. So that is new in the ACC. And then the other part to this is athletic directors speaking to ESPN, and Andrea Adelson, David Hale did an incredible job reporting on this. They've been there at the start. Notre Dame is not part of the Atlantic Coast Conference for football. We know that. The conference would love to have them. That is not happening right now. There's potential in the 5-6 game slate that the ACC and Notre Dame have every season for more competition against Clemson, Miami, Florida State, Louisville, the top tier, quote unquote, teams in the ACC, potential to be playing the Irish more. In my opinion, first thing, you would love to have Notre Dame in the league. Like I said, since that's not happening, what's the next best thing? Trying to get your best competition on the biggest stage against one of the biggest brands in college football history in Notre Dame, right? So more competitive games, games that could really help the league if they knock off Notre Dame in those contests, and just brings more eyeballs to the league. So that is something that is in the works as well. So overall, I think Commissioner Jim Phillips did a really good job and his entire team in getting this sorted out so they can move forward and kind of figure out the rest of this revenue sharing deal.
Now, when you talk about the big brands, where does Carolina sort of fall in that? Do you think that they're near the top, or are you looking at them as a team that's more in the middle because they haven't nearly been as aggressive in terms of coming out and saying, hey, we want more money, like Clemson, like Florida State have done?
Well, I think they're definitely one of those teams that have been reported in the mix of those conversations. And because Carolina is a brand, it's a great brand. And that's why I think you're seeing the shift you're seeing in football, the investment being made in football, the investment to bring in Bill Belichick, because bringing in a Bill Belichick brings eyeballs, it brings credibility, it brings a new sense of life and sorry. Sorry, I got a phone call. It brings in, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
It brings in a new sense of urgency for football because that's where a lot of the money comes from, right? So I do think Carolina is in the mix for all of that. Now, in terms of the success initiatives in 2025, football didn't finish in the top 25. They, struggled obviously in bowl season, but you do get a little added piece to the pie there. Not in the CFP for basketball. Got to make March Madness if you want to make a run, and we could touch on Tar Heel basketball if we'd like to, both men's and women's. But that's an important part too. So I do think they're in the mix for a lot of these things. It's a coveted brand, and adding Bill Belichick will only help in that department.
All right. Well, when it comes to the football side of things, we'll talk about Belichick here in just a second, but I did want to ask you, how do you think Carolina handled everything that went down with Mac Brown? Because there are some Tar Heel fans that, feel one way about it, that it was time. Mac Brown, may have went behind the back of athletic director Bubba Cunningham and told him he was going to walk away at the end of the season, but chose not to. There's others that believe that he was, kind of caught off guard and done wrong here. Where do you stand with what happened at the end with Mac Brown?
Well, I don't really know the inner workings of all of that, so I'll refrain on commenting on some of that because there's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And it's always, there's three sides to every story, right? But I think Mac Brown is a legend of a coach and more than that, a human being. He's a people person first, and I think his legacy is in stone regardless of how things ended. I think he brought Carolina to a place that it wasn't before. He left it in a much better spot than it was when he received it again. And I would have liked to have seen a little less of a messy transition. But then again, that is life and that is business, and you move forward, right? And I think Coach probably knows these are the twilight years of his career, Coach Mac Brown, and the end was at some point. But I don't know if he felt like it was his end, and the school clearly felt like it was their end, and sometimes you're just not on the same page. But I do think the move to bring in someone like Bill Belichick was necessary if you were going to move on from a Hall of Fame head coach like Mac Brown, and you want the standard to be what it is. Look, it's a gamble because I don't really know what this looks like. Bill Belichick is about the same age as Coach Mac Brown, and college football is ever changing, and it's a completely different world than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20. So I'm interested to see what it looks like, but the instant credibility is there. So not the ending I would have necessarily loved for a Hall of Famer in Mac Brown. But such is life and such is this business. It's not always pretty, and he can attest to that too.
Yeah, and so now that as you mentioned, move on to Bill Belichick, he takes over. I just want to go back to the day that it ended up happening, because for me, when I first saw the name pop up, I thought this has got to be a joke, right? There's no way this is actually serious. And then they say, okay, well, he's got the ties here. His dad was a coach on the staff. And I'm like, okay, he's going to take the interview. They're going to pick his football mind, and that's pretty much it. And then, as that week goes along, it starts to become more and more realistic. So when you first heard about this, what was your thinking about the actual chances that a coaching legend, maybe the greatest football coach of all time, would end up in this conference?
I thought it was a long shot. I thought it was just like, rumblings and it wasn't going to be a thing. And you're seeing a lot of college coaches now leave for the NFL because of how demanding it is. But I also know Bubba Cunningham is sharp. and he's willing to try things, and he'll do whatever it takes to get to that point. So I commend him for going out on a limb. Look, I love what he did with Aaron Matson and field hockey. I think that was an unusual hire. It was different. You're essentially hiring a student to be your head coach, replacing a legend. And then doing this too, you're going out on a limb, but you're taking a risk. And sometimes you need to take a risk for a big reward. So I was shocked to see that he wanted to do it. Obviously, it had to be a sweet deal for coach to come back into the game like this. And I know he was obviously craving to be back in a competitive environment with the team and leading young men. So I can't say I ever thought that I would be reporting on this in 100 bazillion years. Like, this is not even a name I would have had on my list. But if Bill Belichick was going to be coaching in college, going back to that point you mentioned earlier, like, do you consider Carolina one of those brands? The answer is yes. And for that reason alone, like, you don't just come back and coach in college football if the brand isn't valuable. And I think that speaks for itself. Him wanting to come to Carolina, incredible location, incredible support. The colors are the best. Uh, Boosters and donors who are willing to invest, and great community. So I don't know. I think that the sky could potentially be the limit, or the ceiling is the roof. I'm not really sure yet.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
There you go.
that's one. Does that stay with Mac Brown, or does that move on? I think that's the big question. But when you look at this, what are your thoughts about, like, the actual chances that it does work out? I think what everybody's concerned about, and I was watching y'all's schedule release show the other night, and I thought, I think it was Eric McLean brought up this point of, will guys want to be coached a specific way that Bill Belichick is going to want to coach them because it's a professional environment? Do you think that that is something that Carolina will be able to navigate? Do you think that kids will buy into what he's selling? Or do you think, especially in this day and age, it's tough to ask kids to be able to respond to professional coaching like that?
I think you're going to have to get the right kid in there, right? Not everyone's going to survive, and that's fine. I think Bill Belichick's okay with that. I think Bill Belichick's going to have to adjust a little bit too. It's going to take some meeting in the middle. Like, what works in the NFL doesn't work in college, and what works in college doesn't work in the NFL. So you cannot just take that exact blueprint and bring it to Chapel Hill. So there's going to take adjustment really on both sides. Now, you can have the foundation, but whatever's laid on top of that foundation might be a little bit different for Coach Belichick, and he'll have people around him that maybe are more relatable in terms of the youth and what the college game is actually like. And his son, for instance, knows a thing or two about that, right? So it's not going to be completely foreign, but yeah, it's going to take a certain kind of young man to come in there and decide this is what I want to do. And like we even talked about on the schedule release show on Monday, like, do your job is his motto. And it's the motto that he's lived by and has led to 6 Lombardi trophies as a head coach, 8 as a coach in general in the NFL. But with that being said, having fun also comes with winning, right? So that's kind of the caveat there, is like, yeah, you can have fun, but losing sucks. You can also win, and then it translates to fun. So there's going to have to be a happy medium, I think, on both sides. I think it can work. It's just not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the thing that I think a lot of Tar Heel fans are going to have to accept, is that it might not look great coming out of the gate. Now, when you look at that schedule, Carolina comes out, they play TCU to start the year.
Yep.
Then they have, a game against Charlotte, Richmond, and then they travel on the road to UCF. I mean, when you look at that, for Carolina fans, I mean, I think a lot of people are hoping that they come out, they're immediately competitive. They're, I saw ESPN's Mark Schlabach put them in the college football playoff in year 1 under Bill Belichick.
What?
Yes, this was a thing. And, an article had to go up on the website, of course, because that's unbelievable stuff. I think that is crazy. And people have blasted me. Tar Heel fans are saying, oh, you don't believe in this team enough. But my thing is like,
what is there to believe in? Let me pose that question. What's there to believe in?
That's the thing, is there's no history.
That's not even a knock.
Right. You're right. I think because
Drake May's not walking through that door today.
What people are saying, and I think they're hoping that it translates immediately, is that he is such a great football mind that kids will just buy in and automatically things will look great. My thing is that, guys, a lot of this roster still looks the same from last year. And you're going from a guy that, I hate to say it, man, Mac Brown, the second time around, he was not old school Mac Brown. It was more one of the most player-based coaches I have ever seen. He was a player's guy. And now you're going to a guy that, yeah, he's going to fight for his players. I mean, we just saw he's trying to get the Lombardi trophy changed to the Brady trophy. I mean, he loves his players, but he's going to be much harder on them. And so, I mean, my thing is like, where do you think expectations should be for Tar Heel fans? How do you sort of measure that coming in? Because I think all of us want to be really excited, but at the same time, there are some of us that are like, whoa, let's pull back a little bit. This is also Carolina football.
I think people should be excited because it's new life. There should be butts in the seat because I think we're all anxious to see what it can be. Look, he does come in with the pedigree, and you cannot deny he knows how to win football games. He knows the recipe, what to do. Now, the other question here, though, is do you have the personnel? And look, you can change things on a dime this day and age with the transfer portal. So I anticipate they're going to be busy, especially after spring ball, bringing in some talent from around the country that can help. I don't know what their win total is going to be. I do expect to see competitive football, accountability, guys running to the football, guys playing hard. I think those are things that if you're a Carolina fan, if you're seeing the want to and the try and the progress and it's there, maybe it's not wins, maybe it is, then you should feel confident moving forward. But it's going to take, in my opinion, a little bit of time. Now, look at Fran Brown taking over a Syracuse program, double-digit wins this season. He's never been a head coach in his life. It is very possible. It starts at the quarterback position, though. They had Kyle McCord in Central New York. My big question is, who's your quarterback in Chapel Hill?
Probably, if I had to guess right now, I think it's Bryce Baker.
Okay.
And so you're hoping that he's Sam Howell.
Right. And that could very well be the case. I want to see it for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that they navigated to have that opportunity on a Monday night. I think that is awesome against TCU. I think that is a great thing to do, especially with Bill Belichick at the helm and being flexible and TCU as well, getting that game pushed to Monday night. Like, that is a real opportunity to show people, like, we mean business.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows what it's going to be after September 1st. But you're going to know Carolina football this year and beyond. All right. So I think that is awesome. And you do look at their schedule, Anthony, and it's not the worst schedule in the world.
Yep.
Like, that first month could be really interesting, right? You have an open date before Clemson in your house, which is, first of all, great that you're home and people are already going to be there at Keenan because, you know, there's this allure that Bill Belichick's the head coach. Also, shout out to it now being turf or grass, not turf, grass, real grass, changing over, which is really cool. Then you have an open date after Clemson before you go out to California. So get some rest before you go out to Cal. All right, Cal's a competitive team. We'll see.
Yep.
Then you have Virginia. Then you go to Syracuse, which is a Friday night, Halloween. Don't really know what Cuse is going to look like. They have a gauntlet of a schedule. Then you get Stanford. You go down the street to Wake. You host Duke. So Duke's in your house. And then you do close at NC State. But those last 4 games, the month of November, they don't leave the state. So it's actually really set up for them to potentially make a little bit of a run here. You win some of those games and you don't know what happens. You know, I do think Clemson's going to be far superior than them. Syracuse is a tough place to play on a Friday night Halloween. It could be rocking in there. You do have to go out to California. It's just a tough road trip. But there are chances in there for them to pull some wins out. And if a couple of those go your way and the ball bounces right, you could be looking at 7-8 wins.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm thinking more of the 8-9 potentially range because, I mean, like you said, I think the Syracuse game to me is going to be really difficult. I don't know exactly what that team looks like, but I think Fran Brown is a heck of a coach. I think that's going to be a really tough game for them. The non-conference, I mean, I feel like somewhere they're going to lose. Like maybe it's TCU, and that would suck because I think that would take some air out for some Tar Heel fans.
I know, and I hope that it doesn't.
Right.
I hope that it doesn't. Because, like, you're just going to see for the first time what this is. You got to let it marinate, right? So, but I agree with you. It could be TCU, and at UCF. I mean, look, I don't know what UCF is going to look like. New head coach there as well. So, um, that's an interesting one to circle as well because they'll have some athletes down there in Orlando.
Oh, they definitely do. My thing is like I'm glad. Like, and it wouldn't happen because that's not how college football works. You'd rather play them early in the year than late because Scott Frost coming back, it's going to take them a little bit of time to readjust to what he wants to do, but he's proven he can have success there. But
Right.
yeah, that's the thing that I think a lot of people need to realize is that if they lose a game early in the season, even if it's one that you don't think that they should lose, barring like if they lose to Charlotte or Richmond, we can have a conversation about, okay, it's time to panic a little bit. But like if they lose to TCU or to Central Florida, I don't think that's the end of the world. And it feels like Tar Heel fans, we have seen this. And I mean, you've probably seen it from being around the ACC for a while. Like I'm even concerned about the fact that the opening game is on a Thursday or on a Monday night, that Tar Heel fans are going to be like, well, it's too late. We got to get up. I mean, look,
Get up and get to the stadium.
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. And then I'm going to come back here and run my show. And I mean, Fitty's going to do the same thing. And his show starts at 6:00 in the morning. So like, I hope that level of excitement is there and can sort of continue. Now, my question for you is, in terms of excitement, is there an excitement around the league or is it really just at Carolina? Because I think this is the type of name where even the league as a whole, people are like, this is an amazing hire by them and something that as a league we can rally behind.
I agree. I think it like rising tide elevates all boats, right? I think that's important. And when Bill Belichick is around, that means there's going to be television cameras, which means your team gets spotlighted too. And it's credibility in the league, it's eyeballs, it's all of the above, right? So one of the things that stood out to me about Carolina's schedule, they have 3 non-Saturday games. Like we mentioned, the Monday night against TCU, at Cal is either a Thursday or Friday. They're still determining that. Then you have the Halloween Friday night game at Syracuse. So there's opportunities to be on a massive national stage for Carolina and for whoever they're playing, for TCU, for Cal, for Syracuse, right? So to me, I think it puts everybody on notice to have his mind in a room, even in like, barring he goes to this stuff, but like Amelia Island, when all the coaches meet, in April or May, whenever that is, April, I guess, to talk about, how to make things better. That's another big name and opinion in the room who holds value. And granted, it hasn't been in college football, but he knows ball. So I think it is a beneficial thing for the entire league and really for college football as a whole, because people are going to want to know exactly what this looks like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I also wonder is, with all the experience, you mentioned he doesn't come from the college game. With the experience that he's bringing from the pro level, do you think this ultimately leads to changes around the rest of the conference in terms of how they're approaching putting together their roster, stuff like that? I mean, Carolina's basically got an entire front office now. And I know that there are people that have GMs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you think this sort of advances that for some of the other schools in the conference too?
Yeah, I just think that we're already on that route. Like, Carolina's fast tracked it now because, Bill Belichick has said, like, this is who I want in these roles because he's done it at that level. But yeah, almost everyone has a general manager now. People involved with particular things, so the head coach doesn't have to do it. And it's become such a quote unquote professional game now that you physically can't do all of that as just a head coach. So yeah, I do think, we'll see how it goes and how you navigate it. I don't know that they're necessarily the blueprint, but this is not surprising to have it starting to look more professional. You have a coach who comes from the pros and the game is just rapidly changing in that direction. So I guess kind of tailoring it more toward that would make sense. So people are going to be watching to see how this works because it's definitely different. But like I said, Bubba Cunningham said, let's take a risk. If we're going to hire someone new, and try to really change Carolina football, because I know fans are like enraged, but it's not like you've been out here winning championships and then you fell off a cliff. Like, let's temper expectations here. But there's potential for this brand to do big things, and the fans care, and the boosters and donors are there. So why can't we win? You can. You just have to have that full blown support and just have the right person in place to do it.
Now the thing is do you believe that they will get the support that they need? They were talking about $20 million for NIL and stuff like that. Do you believe, from people that you've been around in the ACC and being around the fan base, do you think that Tar Heel fans are going to be able to buy into the idea of Carolina football being as important as Carolina basketball?
Yeah, because I think everyone realizes the revenue it generates and the eyeballs it generates. Like Carolina basketball is everything and more, and that's a conversation for another day because we were talking about it on, between us on the Nothing But Net crew. Like, Carol, this is not the standard for Carolina basketball. It's simply not. But football, at the end of the day, is the big driver of revenue. It is what uplifts an athletic department. So you have to be good in that area for everything else to follow suit. And basketball will always have its brand name. Um, but I think football has to get there as well. And you're seeing, if you want to look at the SEC, they invested in basketball after they've already had this. They obviously have the football investment, but you have to really, they targeted basketball, invested in it, and now you're seeing they're like the best conference in basketball right now. You have to be intentional. And I think Carolina's being very intentional about this because it's a trickle down effect.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And one of the interesting things, Brendan Marks, who covers Carolina for The Athletic, he
Yeah.
said, if this doesn't work out, this could potentially lead to the elimination of certain teams on campus. Like if this goes horribly wrong and the revenue doesn't end up being there because Carolina just isn't good in football, that could be what damages your athletic department. I mean, is that kind of what you're hearing from other ACC teams? Because we're not in the same standing that the SEC and the Big Ten is. Sort of going full circle here, I think, what we heard today about the TV deal and everything like that, it gets you closer, but I don't think it completely closes that gap. And that's why that worry is probably still there.
Yeah, I mean, the worry is going to be there, and it doesn't close the gap at all because the revenue doesn't change. It's through 2036. It's the same thing that it was. And in the next 2 years, that gap's next two, three, four, that gap's only going to get bigger. But that's why the ACC is trying different ways to do things, to share the revenue. What are some incentives we can give to teams that are winning? That's just the name of the game now. And look, that's what we say today. What is college athletics going to look like in 2 years? We don't even know. It's changed so much in the last two. Um, I don't. I haven't been hearing anything about fear and eliminating sports. Like that's always on the table, and there's constant conversation that's way above my pay grade, about how this all works. If you want to sustain the big sports, what do you do with the smaller sports? But those are some of the things that have to be sorted out by the people who get paid a lot of money to sort it out. But it's just a different world. It's just such a different world. But I do think there's such value in those smaller sports, and especially look at Carolina, like the football or the field hockey and the soccer, like the lacrosse. Like these are important components to what makes Carolina so great. And to lose that would really be heartbreaking, but we're certainly not there yet. I think they're very important. But I don't know what ends up happening with football, but you got to invest in it and at least try to invest in it for everything else to stay afloat.
Yeah. I mean, Carolina prides itself on those smaller programs. I think that's one thing we've always loved and admired as Tar Heel fans is how competitive all of those other sports are, to
Yeah,
the point where we don't even have to worry about them. Like nobody ever frets about
never.
those programs because it's like, oh, they're a good.
Baseball.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that we're focused, really our main focus. I mean, this year it's definitely basketball and it's been really during the Hubert Davis era because it's been such a roller coaster. But for the longest time, it was football. It's can we get it competitive and everything like that? Now, one thing, if Carolina does get it competitive, they want to make the college football playoff. This for you, I always love asking you college football playoff questions because, of course, you were a fan of a team that got spurned by the 14 playoff. What did you think of the 12-team playoff, and what did you think about the choice to include SMU over Alabama? How much did that help the ACC out, and how much do you think that should have the ACC teams on board with this playoff system?
I liked the 12-team playoff. I enjoyed it. I do think it was really lengthy. Um, it's really long. I don't know how you make it even bigger than it already is. I think it made the regular season more competitive. I actually think it had value in conference championships, especially in the ACC.
Mhm.
I think they did the right thing by putting SMU in, regardless of what the result was in the first round, because as we have seen through this 12-team playoff, and we've already seen it in years past, but apparently you needed a 12-team playoff to shut people up. You cannot anticipate or create on paper what's going to actually happen on a football field,
Mhm.
i.e., Ohio State, Oregon. You just simply cannot do it. So, for the people who are upset that the ACC got ousted and Alabama should have been in before SMU, Alabama shouldn't have lost to bad teams in the regular season, I don't know what to tell you. There were a lot of teams who lost by double digits, 20 plus, 17 plus, 15 plus. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. This is nothing new. It's happened since we've instated the college football playoff, whether it be 4 or 12. I do think they'll probably adjust the auto bid seating
Mhm.
thing. I think you might get some more competitive games in those first two rounds if you're not giving the buys to the highest four ranked conference champs. I think that could shift a little bit. I think it was good for the ACC to have two, and I think it's right. I think discrediting this as a power league is a joke. You're not watching, you're not paying attention. If that's how you feel, I also do think the ACC probably could have performed better. And truthfully, the week before, the ACC had a chance to potentially put three teams in and drop the ball. Miami losing at Syracuse um, screwed that up a little bit. So would have been nice to potentially see Miami in there as well, but you know what? They lost their way out of the playoff, and that's their fault. So I think the choice was good to put SMU in. I loved the 12 team. I'd like to see maybe the seating shift, but I also understand if you want a bigger sample size than just 1 year before changing that. And I don't know how you go past 12 because the fact that the game was like, what, 2 weeks ago, like a week and a half ago, is insane.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, I think this is, the perfect thing to sort of follow up on. What did you make of the idea from Jim Phillips about either the number one team in the conference getting the auto bid, choosing not to play in the conference championship, which then means that the 2 versus 3 teams in the conference end up playing to try to help, I guess, their own playoff chances, or the mini bracket where the top 4 teams would end up playing each other? To me, I don't understand the logistics of that. And I know some people were saying, you could mess with the final week of the regular season, set up certain matchups or whatever. But to me, I mean, we know how these universities are. They are hungry for the money from these home games because that's where they get their revenue from. Are they really going to want to do that? And then you're adding another set of games to what is already just a long, long season for a lot of these guys?
So that was certainly just like an idea that was thrown out there. This has not, let me preface this by saying this has not like been discussed amongst athletic directors and the powers that be. This was just him trying to throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks, which to be fair, that's kind of what you have to do nowadays. So I appreciate the creative thought there. I actually, at the end of the day, when Rhett Lashley, the head coach at SMU, was saying, like, maybe we shouldn't play in the championship game because apparently if we lose, we could be on the outside looking in. Playing in the championship game ultimately is what helped them get in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it Their performance spoke for itself. So I think that kind of cleared up that conversation. I would prefer to see my top 2 teams playing and not the second and third team, because the top team in the league may not be a lock in the CFP if that's the case. I don't know. I'm all about trying to find different ways to do things, but that was certainly unique, and they clearly had mapped out a little bit more than I really know, but that has not actually been put on the table. And I think it would take a lot for that to actually change.
Yeah, I think
Like a
to me,
lot.
yeah, I think that's pretty crazy. I mean, especially the thing about sitting your top team out.
Yeah, I
Because
don't think you can do that. That's just to me, that takes away, in my opinion, the integrity of a championship game.
well, yeah, I mean, so what are you going to do? You're going to give the winner of the 2 versus 3 game what trophy? Congratulations, you won second place. Like
Yeah, no, I don't know.
it's very odd. It doesn't really make sense. And then with the bracket format, I mean, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this as a Tar Heel fan, does the fourth team in this conference really deserve to play for a conference title? Like, you've got to give some meaning to the regular season. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think any of that's going to stick, but I think it was more so just like we've got to figure out how to make sure the ACC continues to be in this conversation as other conferences try to monopolize things.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. All right, last question on the way out here. I know Tar Heel fans dreaming of competing in the ACC this season.
Yeah.
Who do you think are the teams that they have to be looking at as the biggest competitors towards the top of the conference that they would have to jump over?
Football-wise?
Yes.
Clemson, to me, is far and above number one. I just think the pedigree is obviously there. They're the defending ACC champions. They won 8 of the last 10. And to me, even their loss in the playoffs, I was really optimistic walking away because a lot of those pieces are coming back. And they made a change at defensive coordinator. Wes Goodwin is an amazing man. I just think they needed a new voice over there. And I think Tom Allen's a great pick just in general in terms of fit and the culture there, and what he can do as a DC. What he did at Penn State this year was great. I just think that's going to be a different looking elevated defense. So if you add that with what I saw offensively, I have questions at running back, but I think Cade Klubnik really proved himself to be in the mix for one of the best in the country. SMU, you have to put them up there too. They got their quarterback back. I know the last time we saw him out, that was not his best performance. He chose to have his worst day on the biggest stage, and that sucks. But I hope people don't give up on Kevin Jennings and what Rhett Lashley does there, the offense they run. They're going to be competitive year in and year out, and defensively, they don't get enough credit. So I think they're going to be at the top there. You cannot count out Louisville. I think we forget about them, and that Stanford loss sucked. We might be having a different conversation had they not lost that Stanford game. But they bring in Miller Moss at quarterback, and I just think they have some potential this year, like they do every year. You have to talk Miami because I think they really set their foundation. I'm interested to see what happens with Carson Beck. Those would be my 4 that I would put up there for sure. Now I didn't even mention Florida State because Lord knows what they're. I have faith in Mike Norvell. I have faith in the changes that they've made at coordinator. You know, the brand is there for them to do big things. I want to see it first. Georgia Tech too, I think is actually going to be pretty good.
Yeah, because they bring back Haynes King, right?
They got King. They're a couple of their skill players. Tyler Santucci running that defense. I'd say those are your handful. If you want to include Georgia Tech in those 4, I'm not including Florida State until I see what I see.
And what's insane about those 6 that you just named off, Carolina plays one of those teams, and the one is Clemson at home. So, I mean,
that's what I mean. When I look at their schedule, I'm like, listen, that is not a gauntlet.
Yep.
Granted, you don't know what teams are going to look like. Like you would have looked at this last year and be like, Syracuse and Duke, but like both of them, one had 10 wins, one had 9. You never know. But yeah, I like Carolina's schedule.
Yeah, I think it sets up for a lot of success. So yeah, we'll see what goes on. But Taylor, it's always fun talking to you.
Great talking to you.
We love having you on the show. And so glad that you're up there now in Bristol handling everything. But hey, I'm going to tell you right now, if this storyline of Bill Belichick turns out to be as good as we thought it could be, and this team is, competitive, I think you might be spending a lot of time down here with that ACC huddle crew. So
or it's the opposite, because then ESPN's going to steal every game and you'll never see the huddle again. But I hope and I pray, because I know the environment's going to be awesome. But first things first, here's to hoping for some March Madness. And if you're not in love with what the men's team's doing right now, the women look really good.
Women with a big game tonight, actually, while we're recording here against Cal. So, yeah, that's a big one for them. For the men, every game is huge. Every game's huge. And, we've been talking about it on the Four Corners podcast. Taylor, they're driving us crazy. I mean, we need Tar Heel football. I never thought I would say that in my life, but we need Tar Heel football to help us out, because Tar Heel basketball is driving me insane.
I know. It's a tough nightly watch, because you never know what you're going to get. But here's to hoping that by March, they're on the right side of the bubble.
Let's pray. Let's pray.
Let's
Seriously. All right, Taylor. Thanks so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you.